Independent Petroleum Marketers Association cautions oil marketers against acts that could lead to disruption of fuel supply. Independent National Electoral Commission says it doesn't need a new electoral bill to deliver clean elections next year. In international news, the United Kingdom sinks deeper in Brexit crisis. Prime Minister postpones parliamentary vote. And in sport, Victor Moses and Nigerian coach may reunite as Fulham join race for Chelsea star.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, IPMAN, has advised oil marketers, including the Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria, MOMAN, Depot and Petroleum Product Marketers Association, DAPMAN, and the Independent Petroleum Product Importers, IPPI, against acts that could destabilize petroleum supply in the country. IPMAN National Secretary Dalaji Pasali described recent actions by the organizations concerning fuel subsidy claims as an act of intimidation and an attempt to frustrate the efforts by the government to ensure Nigerians have a good holiday season. Pasali condemned the motives of some groups he said had put their own personal interest above national interest. He cautioned the groups against shutting down petroleum supply during this time of the year as it could amount to sabotage. He told IPMAN members the government is making efforts to settle the debt it owed them. In an oil-related story, 2 oil communities in Bayelsa State are angry at multinational oil companies and unemployed youth whom they say collude to damage oil pipelines to cause pillage and extort money from the government. The communities also accuse oil firms of using security agents to intimidate locals during protests. They say residents are battling strange illnesses because of crude oil pollution of their drinking water and seafood. They laid these claims while receiving Robert Petrie, the Netherlands ambassador to Nigeria, who was on a fact-finding visit. They asked the ambassador to intervene with Shell and Ajib oil companies to provide them with potable water, electricity, and other basic amenities. The ambassador told the communities he had heard their concerns and assured them his embassy would share the concerns with Shell and with the government. The Independent National Electoral Commission says it does not need a new Electoral Act to deliver a free, fair and credible election next year. This assurance came as President Muhammadu Buhari vetoed the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2018. INEC says it has mapped out strategies and that it would use enhanced smart card readers. It says incorporating the card readers in the Electoral Act was to give legal cover in case of authenticating the permanent voter cards of eligible voters. INEC says unlike 2015, when there were no technological backup solutions to electoral challenges, the card readers have now been optimized both in hardware and software. The Commission says this will solve many of the challenges associated with past elections in the country. The Senior Staff Association of Nigeria Universities, SANU, says it would embark on a 3-day nationwide protest beginning in a week. Minister of Labour and Employment Senator Chris Ngige announced that the federal government would secure 8 billion naira within 5 weeks to pay NASU's Joint Action Committee. The Union Public Relations Office Ambassador Abdusubul Salam says the protest is about the government's non-implementation of an agreement it reached with the union. The Non-Academic Staff Union of Universities, NASU, and the National Association of Academic Technologists, NAT, had embarked on a nationwide strike in December last year. The action was suspended in March. Meanwhile, Labour Minister Dr. Chris Ngige has announced at a reconciliation meeting in Abuja that the government and the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, have reached a partial agreement. He says this should resolve the strike which started in early November. The minister said they discussed issues related to agreements they had in shortfall in salaries of some federal universities workers and lecturers. He said ASUU had submitted a list of the Accountant General's office and the government has agreed that the presidential initiative on continuous auditing would cross-check that list by Wednesday. Kidnappers in Ondo State are said to have killed one of their victims, a lecturer at the Rufus Giwa Polytechnic in Owo, 6 days after they were adopted. Taiwo Akinyemi was reportedly killed on Sunday. A suspected Fulani gunmen seized 4 persons, including deceased, on the Akure-Owo Expressway in our local government area last week. They have released the 3 other victims who were staff members of the Federal Medical Center, Owo. The gunmen were reported to have tied the body of the 52-year-old Akinyemi to a tree in bush where it was found. He was killed because his family could not pay their ransom demand on time. Governor Rotimi Akeredolu joined lecturers and students of the Polytechnic on Monday in a procession on the campus as to respect and honor the late lecturer. Nigeria has been listed among the 10 hungriest nations in the world. The 2018 Goalkeepers Report by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation says by 2050, more than 1/3 of the extremely poor people in the world would live in Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That is not difficult to fathom considering the forecast that the population of Nigeria, currently the world's 7th most populous nation, would hit 400 million by 2050. 400 million. The report also shows that by 2050, more than 150 million Nigerians will be extremely poor, and Nigeria would be home to the highest number of extremely poor people in the world. The report shows that 5 million children up to the age of 5 in the northeastern part of the world, of Nigeria rather, are affected by severe acute malnutrition. Boko Haram activities in that region is blamed for the spike in the number of very hungry children. A UNICEF report shows that in Nigeria, 1 in 5 children with severe acute malnutrition cases would die if treatment is not provided.
We have an estimated 450,000 children who will suffer from severe acute malnutrition this year. We've treated about 170,000 children so far. So we continue to...
That is absolutely very sad. Mrs. Aisha Buhari, wife of the Nigerian president, has been appointed by her husband to the Presidential Advisory Committee on the Elimination of Drug Abuse. The committee is chaired by Lagos State former military administrator, retired Brigadier General Buba Mara. The president also inaugurated the Ministerial Steering Committee and appointed the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, as its head. At inauguration in Abuja on Monday, Buhari called for collective action to help those in the groups of drugs to build a new life. He said drug abuse has become a major public health problem in the country, which must be faced and addressed as an emergency. Coming up, African Stories. Stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
If you know fit go internet or follow for Twitter, you know fit snap photo send or get it photo send. Now because you dey use Palasa, your phone no dey answer. See me see wahala. My brother, go get smartphone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no go for your hand, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no fit take selfie. Drop that Palasa phone. No be correct phone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone.
Upgrade to a smartphone today and get double data for 6 months on any MTN data bundle you buy. Simply purchase a smartphone from any store, anywhere in Nigeria, or bring your current smartphone from any network. Insert your MTN SIM card to start enjoying your double data bonus. Offer is open to all new and existing MTN subscribers. Join the largest smartphone movement today.
Make it not for your hand, that's Palasa phone.
Shining our eyes on breaking news, whether in the east or in the west, with Al-Shabaab in Somalia and Boko Haram in Nigeria, with turbulence in the north and agitation in the south. Wherever you live in Nigeria, wherever news happens in Africa, we've got it covered. ANN News, connecting Africans in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In African Stories, the World Health Organization says at least 2,000 healthcare and frontline workers in South Sudan will be offered Ebola vaccines to try to stop an importation of the viral disease from an epidemic in the North Kivu and the Ituri provinces of Democratic Republic of the Congo. WHO and the Congo health officials say the outbreak is now the second biggest in history and has so far infected at least 450 persons and killed at least 270. South Sudan is one of the three countries with Uganda and Rwanda that the WHO said are at a very high risk of having Ebola imported from DR Congo. WHO said in a statement, teams of vaccinators have been trained by global health agencies and are now ready to conduct the Ebola vaccination plan in South Sudan's capital, Juba, starting from next week. China is encouraging Ethiopia to develop its coffee industry in order to meet growing domestic demand for beverage in China. China Coffee Association says the country purchased 250,000 tons of coffee last year, but very little of that was from African producers. One Ethiopia exporter sends 15 massive containers of coffee to China annually, but the company believes China is an untapped market. Only 2,500 of China's 38,000 tons of coffee imported this year is from Ethiopia. Countries like Vietnam take the lion's share, supplying almost half of all coffee consumed in China. Chinese officials hope Ethiopia can adopt more promotional activities to develop its coffee sales in China.
A place in this Chinese market, Ethiopia should carry on long-term promotion activities. This will take many years for brand distribution and market cultivation.
The Ethiopian government says its ability to meet international demand was hampered by inconsistent quality and quantities.
Get fair price for our production competing in the international market. Coffee production is contested by pests and diseases resulted from climate change. In addition, coffee growers, especially smallholders, are vulnerable to price fluctuation.
Ethiopia produces 700,000 tons of coffee annually, earning around $500 million from exports. A nationwide strike is underway in Gabon, where workers are calling for a reversal of recent constitutional changes. Louis Patrick, member of Gabon Trade Union Alliance, says the people don't know exactly who is in charge of Gabon today. The union wants the president to speak out and reassure the Gabonese people. 59-year-old President Ali Bongo has been out of the country since October seeking medical treatment, first in Saudi Arabia, followed by Morocco. He had suffered a stroke. In his absence, Gabon's Constitutional Court has amended parts of the constitution to allow the Vice President, Pierre-Claver Moussevu, to hold ministerial meetings and to block pending cases. But the Trade Union Alliance wants the Senate President to act as interim president as specified in the Constitution before it was amended. Several experts from different countries have voiced their support for multilateralism in trade. They particularly pointed to China's actions to promote cooperation based on win-win results. Sanusha Naidu, a foreign policy analyst based in South Africa, said the recent G20 summit has told the world the significance of multilateralism in trade, which has played an active role for the global economy.
It was very sobering in a sense that the realities of the global landscape are such that it requires a lot of collective engagement, interaction, and working together. We really need to make sure that there's an open trading system, that globalization should not be undermined.
As Egypt prepares to chair the African Union next year, it is already promoting itself as a linchpin for intra-African trade and a model of economic reform. Over the weekend, the country hosted a high-level business forum in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh that will be followed by an intra-African trade fair in the coming week in the capital, Cairo. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, in a speech to the forum, encouraged investors from inside and outside Africa to take advantage of opportunities on the continent as countries, including his own, pursue economic reform. Sisi says as chair of the African Union, his country will seek sincerely to build on what has been achieved over the past years and to complete the continent's development agenda. The forum was attended by heads of state from countries including Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Niger, and Madagascar. Coming up, international stories, the United Kingdom sinks deeper in Brexit crisis. Prime Minister postpones parliamentary vote. Stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
If you know fit go internet or follow for Twitter, you know fit snap photo send or get it photo send. Now because you dey use palasa, your phone no dey answer. See me see wahala. My brother, go get smartphone, yeah. Drop that palasa phone. Phone wey no go for your hand, yeah. Drop that palasa phone. Phone wey no fit take selfie. Drop that palasa phone. No be correct phone, yeah. Drop that palasa phone.
Upgrade to a smartphone today and get double data for 6 months on any MTN data bundle you buy. Simply purchase a smartphone from any store, anywhere in Nigeria, or bring your current smartphone from any network. Insert your MTN SIM card to start enjoying your double data bonus. Offer is open to all new and existing MTN subscribers. Join the largest smartphone movement today.
Make it known for your hand, that's palasa phone.
Shining our eyes on breaking news, whether in the east or in the west, with Al-Shabaab in Somalia and Boko Haram in Nigeria, with turbulence in the north and agitation in the south. Wherever you live in Nigeria, wherever news happens in Africa, we've got it covered. ANN News, connecting Africans in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News happening around the world. British politics is at a crossroads and Brexit appears to be a menacing problem for Prime Minister Theresa May, who has had to juggle different strategies. In the end, the Prime Minister had to postpone a parliamentary vote that would have determined the fate of a Brexit deal. Had she insisted on a vote on Monday, the deal would have failed in Parliament. Opposition members accused her of losing control of events. Some of her own political members turned her to govern or quit. Many issues still weigh down the deal, especially the Northern Ireland border. But the European Union Court says, regardless of the deal with the UK, the country can unilaterally decide to reverse its decision to leave the 28-member bloc prior to its scheduled exit on March the 29th next year. If this deal fails in Parliament, many analysts believe Theresa May could be ousted as Prime Minister. Every weekend for the past 5 weekends in France have been marked by violent protests, especially in Paris and what has come to be known as Yellow Vest protests. They started as demonstrations against planned hike in fuel tax, which they say were already too high. More demands have now crept into the demonstrations. The protests have become increasingly more violent each weekend. The last week, 40-year-old French President Emmanuel Macron decided he would address the nation and offer an olive branch. So on Monday, he did that in a nationally televised address in which he offered to step back from the full tax increases. He also offered to raise the minimum wage by €100 per month and hold down taxes on pensioners. But his offers were ridiculed by a population that has grown weary of him. Yellow-vested demonstrators say they would continue to mount pressure on a president they call arrogant, out of touch, and who caters to the rich. Some have even called for his resignation. Although he pleaded for calm, protesters say they would continue their agitation. Hundreds of millions of euros worth of property have been destroyed. 3 have died and hundreds have been injured in the nationwide protests. The chief financial officer of Chinese telecom giant Huawei has offered to submit to strict electronic monitoring as she sought release from Canadian detention. But she will have to wait at least 1 more day to know her fate. Meng Wanzhouqi was arrested on December the 1st at Washington's request. The same day, Chinese and U.S. leaders agreed to a 90-day truce in a trade war that has threatened global economic growth. The 46-year-old's arrest rocked financial market and infiltrated Beijing, fueling tensions between the world's 2 largest economies and complicating efforts to resolve their trade dispute. Washington has accused Huawei of using a Hong Kong shell company to sell equipment to Iran in violation of U.S. sanctions. The U.S. State Department has barred former Gambian President Jammeh and members of his immediate family from entering the United States. The decision comes almost 2 years after Jammeh was forced into exile in Equatorial Guinea after he refused to concede defeat in a presidential election. Jammeh ruled the West African country for 2 decades and lost a democratic election to Adama Barrow 2 years ago. When Jammeh refused to step down, African Union and the West African regional body ECOWAS sent in their military to remove him. He fled to Equatorial Guinea in January last year. The State Department says Jammeh is now being banned from entering the U.S. under a category that applies to foreign government officials who are believed to have committed significant corruption or a gross violation of human rights. The ban also applies to Jammeh's wife, Zainab, daughter Mariam, and son Mohammed. Thailand's much delayed general election will be held in February next year, shortly before the military government announced the lifting of a ban on political campaigning. The military government had imposed the strict prohibition after taking power in 2014, citing the need to restore order after months of street protests. It partially relaxed it in September, allowing political parties to resume organizing. The race is expected to pit former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatра's red shirt followers against the military and royalist establishment, which has its own proxy political parties.
You are watching ANN.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Madam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby. We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward. Wait, stop. You okay, lean to your right. Keep walking down, keep walking to the left. Yes. You're almost here. Keep going. You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on, so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and Sport. Fresh facts have emerged on why former Ogun State Sport Commissioner Bukola Olopade resigned his position as Chief Executive Officer of the Bet Niger-sponsored Nigeria National League. Undue interference by the Nigerian Football Federation in the running of the NNL after the NFF board meeting in Asaba, the Nigeria Football Federation was said to have mandated NNL Chairman Chidi Ofo Kenwa to immediately convene a Congress of stakeholders to take a decision which would be ratified by the Executive Committee in a bid to find a lasting solution to the problems associated with NPFL's abrupt end to the season in week 24. Fulham have joined Premier League rivals Crystal Palace in the race for the signature of ex-Super Eagles Darsdale Victor Moses. Nigerian manager Colin Omogbenye, who coaches Fulham on the 18th team, could play a big role in convincing Moses to join Fulham rather than returning to Palace, where he spent 9 years. It is looking likely that the former Nigerian international will end a 6-year association with Chelsea in the January transfer window because of his lack of first-team opportunities, with only 6 matches played this season from the possible 24 in all competitions. The 27-year contract to the Blues runs until the end of June 2021. And that is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on this and other stories, visit our website, tnnafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.